দীর্ঘদিনের প্রস্তুতি, তবুও সব অচেনা। ভারত থেকে প্রথমবার আন্তর্জাতিক স্পেস স্টেশনে যাওয়ার অভিজ্ঞতা কেমন ছিল? কলকাতায় বসে পড়ুয়াদের মজার মজার গল্প শোনালেন গ্রুপ ক্যাপ্টেন শুভাংশু শুক্লা।
Like I said, it is one thing to prepare for it, and the other thing is to experience. Other thing is to experience the mission when it is happening. So we had practiced enough number of times in the simulator. I knew everything. I felt very confident, and we had also done a full dress rehearsal 2 days prior to the launch. Wearing the spacesuit, going up to the rocket, strapping up, everything, the entire cycle, even sitting there for the countdown. Except that the rocket did launch. Everything was rehearsed, everything was known. So I felt very confident that I know everything. But the data is that the engines would ignite in the practice. And that data happens when the engines ignite on the final day when you're being launched. And when those engines come on, the 9 engines of the Falcon 9 rocket, all your preparation, everything that you know, it just flies out of the moon. You forget everything. Because it is such a powerful moment. It is such a strong event that is happening. And when I speak to kids, I describe this feeling as the same that you get when you are sitting in classrooms and appearing for exams and when you see the question paper. All the preparation that you have had, all the hard work that you have done, everything you forget. Something similar. So it was a very fascinating experience for me to just go through this exercise, and we were very excited. It was like a high-powered, I would say, a roller coaster ride. And like kids, we were also screaming. Actually, our commander had to tell us to be quiet. She couldn't hear any calls that were being sent on the ground. And then after all this dynamism, you get to space. And when you get to space, it's extremely in a second, it becomes extremely silent. The engines cut off, the stage separation happens, you are floating in microgravity, and you feel nothing. It becomes effortless, absolute silence. It's not exactly silent, but you feel the feeling is such. And space is 2 things. It is a lot of fun. There is no doubt about it. It is extremely fun to be there, but it is also very disorienting. The concept of space, you really don't understand. We are 3-dimensional beings. We call ourselves 3-dimensional beings. But even if you look at the setting of this room, all of you are sitting on chairs. Everybody is standing on floor. Nobody is hanging by the ceiling. Nobody is on the wall, right? But in space, you can do that. You really understand how to use the 3-dimensional space. I remember my second day, I had to navigate across a module. And there was a NASA astronaut who was carrying out her experiment right in the center of the module. She had set up her entire experiment there. So there was no space for me to go. That is what I felt because I had gone from Earth. So I sat down and I was waiting. Then this other astronaut who comes up to me and she says that, "Shubs, what are you doing here?" And I tell her that I need to go the other side. And she says, "Then why don't you go?" And I show her, but she's in the way. And this one, she starts laughing. And she takes me by my hand, she takes me to the ceiling and tells me, "Walk here." And that is the time, your mind switches, it flips. It understands that this is how space is different. You are not restricted to one plane. You can do anything. So then we had started having days that today is the day of walking on ceilings, or today is the day of walking on starboard wall. And we would just navigate on the wall. So it was a lot of fun, but your mind has to flip. It has to understand.
মহাকাশ থেকে ফেরার পরের দিনই নিজের ল্যাপটপ ভেঙে ফেলেছিলেন শুভাংশু।
How many of you felt when I was leaving the lens every fall? So this is what the mind has to get used to this concept when you get to space, that it is okay to let go of things. And after 6 or 7 days, you're really comfortable. You are leaving things, you're 10 different things, doing your work, collecting them back and putting them back at the place. The problem happens, you come back to Earth with this mindset. And I remember first evening I was working on my laptop, I was replying to a lot of emails. A lot of emails had come, I replied, I was tired and I wanted to sleep. And out of frustration, because I had been replying to so many emails, I quickly shut it down, took it to the side and I left it. That was a very, very quick lesson learned that this will not work here on Earth. For the first time ever, the Indian researchers got an opportunity to conduct science on the International Space Station and bring back the data. And I was very happy to be a part of it, to be a bridge amongst them and the orbit, and conduct these experiments for them. And what does microgravity give you? It gives you a very unique environment. Biological processes, they become faster. Physical sciences and engineering, physical growth becomes much easier. The water, if you spread water, it is always in the form of a bubble. The flame, if you build a fire, it is going to be in the form of a round-shaped fire. So all these things give you a very unique insight into existing problems that we are facing on Earth, or challenges that we are facing in terms of experiments. But more than that, I think, more than the results that we learned, what we learned was how to enable an experiment in space. That in itself is a true challenge. What we can do something simply on ground in a lab, if you want to do the same thing in space, it's another challenge altogether. The experiment, the myogenesis experiment I did, one of the experiments that I did in space, again, to look at the problem of muscle atrophy. It was such a complex experiment that had to be done to contain the fluid in a container, how to provide nutrition to it every second day, how to keep it in the refrigerated environment. Everything has to be learned. Even the smallest of things, how to use syringe, how to use pipettes, everything you have to learn, and you have to understand how to enable it. So I think that was the biggest learning. We understand now how does it happen. How do we make it happen when we make our own space station? And after doing everything, staying there for 18 days, 19 days, it was time for us to come back home. And we were very excited for that. I actually kind of did not want to come back. I was very happy there. It was a great place to be. It is very peaceful. It has an amazing view. And you really understand and you start enjoying the things after a few days, and then it becomes all right for you to stay there. But all that energy that I was talking about, when you go to space, when you want to come back, that has to be dissipated. You have to stop the vehicle. It is moving at, say, 8 kilometers per second around the Earth. How do you stop it? You stop it through the atmosphere. And when you stop it through the atmosphere, it generates friction and heat. And that heat is not ordinary heat, it is almost as hot as sun, 4,000 degrees plus. That is the kind of temperature that is around the capsule. So the entire capsule becomes a big fireball when it is dissipating in the atmosphere. I was, for one, very excited to look at this fireball. How does it look? Because you have two windows in the fuel tank. So when you look at it, it starts yellow, small flames, and then it becomes steady stream, changes color from yellow to red, orange, purple, all shades you see when it is going. But what was very interesting for me that I had to strain my neck, lift my neck slightly to look at this fire. And after some time, I really felt a lot of strain, a lot of pain in my neck. And I thought that we must already be under 3 or 4 Gs right now. That is the kind of pain I was feeling. But again, my background, I am not unfamiliar with G loads. I have been doing that all my life. But when I got my head back and I looked at the display was reading 0.3 G. It was not even 1 G. And that is the kind of shift, that is the kind of effortlessness what I was talking about. When you try to open your eyes when you're coming back, and immediately after coming back, you can feel your eyelids, you can feel the weight of your eyelids. That is the kind of difference in effort that is there in orbit as compared to ground. And when you come back to Earth, again the same thing. As when you go to orbit, everything is new for your body. Now when you come back, the Earth becomes a new environment.